Okay, hereby call this workshop to order. Today is the September 11th, 2018 Superintendent's Workshop. At this time, recognize Dr. Rendell for a series of presentations. Dr. Rendell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the board members for coming to the workshop today, the members of the public that are here, and those that are watching by live stream. The purpose of the workshop is to share information. Today we're going to hear a report from the Audit Committee. Before we turn it over to the Audit Committee to hear their report, I want to give everybody a little background, especially those watching, about the Audit Committee. Our school board policy allows the school board to appoint a couple of different committees. The Audit Committee is one of them. It's an all-voluntary committee made up of 5 members, one appointed by each of the board members, and they give of their time to examine business practices and different things that the board wants to get some more information on, and their input, their perspective, and that kind of thing. So all of the work that has been done by the Audit Committee is totally voluntary. They had to give up a lot of their time, not just to meet at several times throughout the year, but also to review documents on their own time, and then to come here today. We have 3 members of the 5-member committee here with us today, and so I want to thank them for their service so far, voluntary service, and they have some interesting information to share with the board. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Auerwater. He is the chairman of the Audit Committee, selected by the other members of the committee, and he's going to take us through the presentation. But also with us today is Mrs. Gail Gilmore, Mr. Jeff Smith. They are 2 other members of the committee. Mr. Charlie Gisler and Mr. Glenn Herron could not be here today. Those are the other 2 members of the committee. But I really appreciate the insight and expertise that's been offered by the members of the Audit Committee as we work together throughout the year. So I really look forward to hearing their report. Mr. Auerwater.
Okay. Members of the board, Dr. Rendell, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to report the work that we did over approximately the last year. First, I want to point out the members of the committee. As you mentioned, Charlie Geisler and Glenn Herron could not be with us today. Charlie is a CFO and COO, Chief Financial Officer, Chief Operating Officer, Marine Bank and Trust. Glenn Herron is a CPA. Jeff Smith, who is with us, is Clerk of the Circuit Court of Indian River County, as well as its comptroller, effectively like a chief financial officer. He also has a CPA. Gail Phillips Gilmore to my right, she was the vice chairwoman of the committee. She is also a CPA, and I guess I'm the only one that is not a CPA, I and Charlie. So I used to work at the Vanguard Group doing investment management. So first of all, I want to say to my fellow members, please chime in, add your insights and thoughts as we go through the presentation. So we, first of all, we held a total of 5 meetings. The first one, as shown on the slide, was a organizational meeting where we chose the chairperson and vice chairperson. Then we set a fairly quick meeting right after that on May 30th. And the purpose of that was to set the review items. So after I was chosen chairman on May 1st, I tasked the audit committee to come back with potential items for us to study. We put that list together up on the board in this building, and we chose several items, which I'll explain in a minute that we walk through. Then the following 3 meetings that took place in August of last year and January and May of this year, we actually reviewed those items, and in some cases, we did make recommendations. And as is pointed out on the next page, that all the audit committee recommendations made to the school board in the form of motions were passed on a unanimous basis. I am on several governmental bodies, Town of Indian Shores Town Council, City of Vero Beach Utilities Commission, and some other boards, and it's almost, shall we say, unknown that things pass a unanimous basis. So it was a sense of the consensus that occurred, and there was I want to point out there was a lot of discussion that went back and forth. If you have not had the opportunity to review the minutes, they're quite detailed. Brenda Davis did a great job on the minutes, and as I was getting ready to put this package together and review what went on. They were invaluable in terms of looking at not only the decisions we made, but the interaction between the members as we decided on them. Any thoughts on those points, fellow members?
No, I concur with your assessment. Also, how detailed the minutes were helped us remember what we had talked about and prepared us for the next meeting. So I want to also offer my congratulations to Brenda for such a good job.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is go through the review items in chronological order. As I mentioned, our first full, what I would call working meeting in terms of looking at the items occurred on August 28th, 2017. We had a fairly extensive discussion on cost and delivery method of employee benefits. And one thing I want to point out, and I'll also repeat it at the end, Dr. Rendell and his staff provided the committee with the right people in order to be able to ask the right questions. In the case of this discussion, we had two gentlemen from Aon Hewitt that came in and gave a presentation. Also, Carter Morrison as well was quite helpful in this meeting. So what we looked at was the methodology and the, I guess approach would be the right term to use, at the way the school board looks at providing insurance and employee benefits, primarily medical insurance. And for those that might be watching on TV, maybe all three of you, because I'm sure everybody's looking, audit committee meetings are so exciting, but there's generally two different ways that a entity can provide insurance. They can go out and essentially contract with an insurance company and basically concede all of the risk that the insurance company will have to pay benefits much higher than what they originally anticipated, or they can do self-insured. The benefit of the first one is that it cuts off your risk. The negative of it is generally it is more expensive because the insurance company is putting into its pricing, looking at the potential for risk that has an outlier in terms of what might happen in terms of insurance claims, and of course they have to add their profit margin on top of it. So there was an extensive discussion on that, and I think we came away, the audit committee members, that at least right now the approach that the school administration is taking in terms of insurance was probably the most favorable one for the benefit of the taxpayers. Any thoughts, Gail or?
No, I agree with the chairman of the committee. We had a detailed presentation by the consultants, the insurance consultants, and we looked at all alternatives, and we unanimously came up with the way they're doing things would be the best for the school board at this point. So I agree with Bob in his assessment.
And I agree too.
Okay. Well, we did have a couple motions that we passed. One was the way that the insurance broker, Aon, is compensated. And our motion was for the administration to do a study on changing the compensation of Aon to fee-based away from percentage of the insurance premium. So right now, while it's true there's not a direct cost to the school district, there's clearly a cost to it because the insurance company is going to put that in their pricing. And in particular, we were concerned that the insurance broker could be compensated in terms of a higher fee for really not doing additional work. I'll give you an example. Say, just as a little extreme, but say, for example, that the school district, for some reason, increased their workforce by 20%. Well, naturally, the insurance premiums would go up, and because they were being paid a percentage of the insurance premium, they would get extra compensation and yet really do no additional work for it. what we thought was that the administration should maybe do a study of going to a fee-based system and potentially providing some sort of incentives to the broker that if, for example, if you set a benchmark looking at other school districts of how much they pay, and the broker could potentially, if they negotiated a better price or came up with other methodologies to reduce the cost, that they may be paid some sort of a bonus. So, you know, I look back at the school district minutes, videos, and this meeting was on August 28th, and I believe this was discussed on December 12th, 2017, but it was going to be taken a look at, but my understanding is you just recently had a meeting and you continued on with the same methodology. So I guess for whatever reason, decided to go in a different direction, but I do want to point that out. The second motion that we passed is for the district to provide a fully costed analysis between self-insured and fully insured when the health insurance goes out for bid. The school board should consider getting bids for both self and fully insured every 4 to 5 years. Now, I mentioned earlier in this discussion that it appeared that the current methodology is the right way to go, but the committee felt that it was important at least to try to do that comparisons every once in a while to look at whether something might have changed in the insurance industry to make it more appropriate to go out to a fully costed basis. And we recognize that would be a lot of work on the part of the administration and potentially the insurance broker, and that's why we set a fairly long time period. You clearly won't want to do this every year. It would be too much burden on the administration staff. Any other things you'd like
No,
to?
and, you know, going out for bid every so often also protects the school board that they've done their due diligence and, you know, are doing the best that they can for the taxpayers. So that's another reason why we recommended periodic rebidding.
Mrs. Zork, you have a question?
Yes, just a quick question. Did I hear you say 2012 was the last time that we fully cost analysis between self-insured and fully insured?
No, I don't know the last time we did that. We were just suggesting
Oh, okay.
every 4 to 5 years to do that. I don't know if that's ever been done. I'm sure maybe Dr. Rendell can answer that.
I seem to recall that we saw that the last time we were struggling. We looked at several options, including fully insured, and it was significantly more, like 50% more or something.
Correct. It's
Absurd.
about 2 years ago when we were first tackling the health insurance crisis. We tried to determine what the cost would be to go to fully insured. The premium increase was going to be even more significant than the premium increase that we incurred, so we stayed with self-insured.
So around 2016?
About 2 years ago.
Okay.
15 or 16, yeah.
Okay.
The other item we looked at during that meeting on August 28th.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ms.
Just jumping
Jimczyk had a question.
in, because we had just had recently as you had mentioned, and thank you for this, and this is a big one, and I agree on the bottom about that hurdle going from self-insured into fully insured has always been hard, and that's probably what keeps people away. But that now we had a presentation how we're trending up, you know, that we've crashed and we're going to be trending, and that's where we're going to see it not in claims, not where we wish we were with the fully insured. So what happens is, and it usually is with school boards as well as negotiation, you know, I'm not here, and some of our members, so I say this for the ones that remain, it is worth it, and I thank you for suggesting that, because you know, we really, well, I'm sure if we asked you, Jeff, that fully insured is what the county does, and although jumping into that pool is a cost up front, no board or Disney wants to take that on, but at some point, it's safer in many ways, even though that would cost that 1 year. So I'm glad that you suggested this, because I think it should be reviewed constantly, because that's how, if you don't have a really good analysis or, administration company like Aon as to the previous company, you could see where your district can turn into trouble, which is what happened. It was, it's not our district's specialty, so when we hired somebody and based on that, so I really appreciate that last, paragraph that you ask us to do that, because I think it's important for follow-up.
Mr. Chair.
Agreed, 100%. Mr.
Yeah,
Smith?
I just wanted to make sure that you understood, the county does self-insurance as well. And they go out every 3 years and make sure that that's the most effective, cost-effective way. And typically, where the cost is going to increase is on the claim side. If you have significant claims, then your self-insurance fund will deplete, and you may have to raise premiums to counteract that. So managing your claims would be one area that, you could look at for cost savings. But the county has about half of the number of employees that the school board has, and yeah, they do self-insurance because it is cheaper to go out in the marketplace and, self-insure yourself instead of having an insurance company fully provide all those benefits. We have a third-party administrator, Blue Cross Blue Shield, does the administration, and they evaluate the claims, but we fully fund it ourselves, and so that's how we manage it at the county.
Okay. Mr. Searcy?
Jeff, how do y'all compensate the insurance company? Fee-based or a percentage?
I believe, I'll have to check on this, but I believe it's fee-based. I don't think it's a percentage. We pay them a fee every year, and I believe it's fee-based, not percentage.
Any possibility of joining with the school board and so we have more volume and get cheaper prices?
Well, that would be something that the county staff would have to look at. I pay the bills, but I'm not the decision maker there. It certainly, because you have Blue Cross Blue Shield, and we do as well, there may be some opportunities for economies of scale. But, it'd be something that your staff would have to reach out to the county staff and do some research on.
Just asking.
Mrs. Ork?
Just one last question. How do we go about as a board in 2000, if we're looking forward to 4 years total, can I ask Dr. Rundell to have staff put that on radar and bring it to us in 4 years? If it was 2015, then it needs to come back to us
Yes, ma'am.
next year or in 2020?
At the board direction, whenever you decide to tell us to do this, we will do it. I mean, we can put it on the calendar
Right.
as a reminder, but
Right.
Put it in the tickle file.
particular file, yeah.
Tickler file, that's it. Okay. Just one note, I'd be very surprised if the county wished to join with us because our census is much worse than theirs. They have a lot of young males and we have a lot of females. So sad but true, that's the way that risk pools work. Mr. Searcy?
It's always worth asking.
Absolutely, 100% agree. Okay, continue,
Okay.
Chairman.
All right. The other thing we discussed on August 28th was we had a general discussion on other post-employment benefits, OPEBs. For those that are watching and not familiar with those, it's basically an accounting term that looks at retiree health care benefits. And most municipalities have traditionally paid them pay-as-you-go, but there has been recently passed by the Government Accounting Standard Board, GASB, rule, I don't know, principle, is that the right term, I guess?
Best practice.
But, yeah. Well, I think it's more than best practice.
Well,
It's
there's
a requirement.
statement that requires us.
Yes, right, okay, 75,
Yeah.
which says that you have to start to put money aside for those future benefits. And frankly, most state and local governments and school districts around the country have not do that. So we just had a general discussion about, what that might take. And was my understanding that you've recently changed how retirees get paid health benefits, so that it may not be as big of an issue for the school district as maybe some other municipalities. Did I understand that correctly?
Not sure if there.
Basically, what OPEB is because the retirees get the advantage of the reduced premiums because of the large pool, the difference between the market premium, if they had to go out and get it on their own, versus what they're actually having to pay, is considered a subsidized benefit, and that is really what the OPEB is all about. The GASB Statement 75, what it really does is require governmental entities to now include on their balance sheet that actuarially defined and calculated OPEB liability. It doesn't actually require you to cash fund it, but it does require you to book it on your financial statements. Heretofore, it was just a footnote disclosure and didn't affect fund balance. Now it has to go on the liability section of the balance sheet, and it will affect fund balance. We discussed, if I may, Bob.
Yeah, absolutely.
We
Please.
discussed at great length the proper handling of OPEB. I will tell you that Indian River County government is one of only 3 or 4 in the state that is actually cash funding that OPEB liability. And they put it into a trust. That money cannot be used for anything other than OPEB benefits when the retiree claims them. So I manage that trust. I manage the investments for that trust. And once you do that, it accomplishes 2 things. One, it preserves that money for only the OPEB liability and the benefits down the road. And number 2, it's not kicking the can down the road to future taxpayers. And so, you know, the trust is everything that a trust encompasses, where you can't actually grab that money and use it for other purposes other than for the OPEB liability. And our recommendation is for the board to look at trying to get to that point where you can cash fund your OPEB and have that trust money sitting there for when your benefits are being claimed.
No, that's and the town of Indian River Shores, their OPEB is 102% funded, so.
That's great because, as you know, who work around the state, that there's a fiscal cliff that's coming when these folks retire. So Mrs. Justice and then Mr. Searcy.
When did the county establish that trust? What year was that?
This was back in 2008. They had a benefit, in addition to sort of subsidized premium, they had a benefit where if you were a long-term employee and vested, they would pay up to 40% of your premium for you as a retiree. Well, they phased that out. That part of the benefit has been phased out, but a lot of those employees are still working, so that benefit's going to have to be paid somewhere down the line. But the county commission had the foresight to say, hey, look, you know, this is going to be a cliff that we're going to fall over if we do not do something now. So they phased that part of the benefit out, and they established the trust where they would fund it every year. And it becomes part of their budget process, and it's based on a full-time equivalent employee. And the actuary actually calculates, every 2 years, the actuary calculates what that, and updates it in the intervening years, what that premium should be or what that contribution should be per employee for the next budget year. So we do have an actuary that calculates that. It's not just staff estimate. It's done actuarially.
Mr. Searcy?
Having that in place, how does that impact the fund balances then?
Well, it does. That expense per FTE is charged by department as part of the budget process. So they allow for that during the budget process. Now, what's going to happen, though, is when we have to put that liability on the balance sheet, that will then affect fund balance, because heretofore, it's never been on the balance sheet. It's just been a footnote disclosure. So now, with GASB 75, we're actually going to have that on the face of the balance sheet, and yes, that will affect fund balance.
But you're going to have an asset to offset that
Yes.
liability?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Mrs. Simchek?
Well, I just want to note that years ago, I worked for Southampton Town, and they had, not the health, but just in general, like 10 long-term, high-paid employees retire, and their sick pay, vacation pay buyout almost broke the town. it hadn't been budgeted for. That was just, and again, I'm talking about the 1990s, and that had almost broke the bank when they did that. So they started putting those type of benefits on the books, and that would be a smart idea to have that type of planning in the school district, because that one bad year can put you in a bad position. So I just wanted to mention that.
Okay, Mrs. Orr?
One of the things you mentioned, Jeff, was that you manage the investment. Could you speak a little bit
Sure.
about, because that's a pretty conservative investment style.
Yeah, the statutes of the state of Florida define how we are to invest taxpayer money, and then allows us to alternatively do different investment for OPEB trust. So the government money, the taxpayer money that I invest I cannot go out in the marketplace in the stock market and invest that money. I have to be really safe with that. But the OPEB trust, I can go into the marketplace, and I have an investment committee that meets quarterly, and there's 3 people from the public, in addition to myself and the budget director, or his or her representative, and we go over the portfolio and try to maximize the return on the OPEB trust so that it cuts down on the amount of the contribution that's required per FTE to fully fund the OPEB trust. So I can actually go out in the marketplace with that money, but I can't do that with government money. So that's a short synopsis on how I manage those funds.
But you're investing for the longer term.
Sure.
Because you're not going to need that money, so you can have a
Correct.
down year or two and
Yeah,
not
correct.
load a bank up, so to speak.
Correct. Last year, we earned close to 14.4% on that OPEB money.
Okay.
Now, this year, it's going to be a lot different because the market's not performing
It's
like it did
correcting.
last year, but we still have it protected. We still have the mix protected so that we're not going to be losing any money.
Okay, Mrs. Orr?
Just a question. What is the school district's OPEB liability? Do you remember that number? No?
No, I don't.
So- Okay. Can I
We can
Get
get
that.
that, yep.
And just one follow-up question. Jeff, you were saying that you guys have an actuary. Is that do you contract with someone outside?
Yes, yeah. Gabriel Ryder is who we use. But and that's something that, we'll bid out every so often to make sure that we're getting the biggest bang for the buck. But we do have it's an outside firm that specializes in doing actuarial calculations for retirement plans and for OPEB plans.
But that's not particularly super sophisticated to
No.
have to do that, so I
Yeah.
think you can, if you find anybody that's
That's qualified.
qualified,
Yeah.
you get the cheapest price, yeah.
Yeah. But actuarial services is something that is a specialized industry, and you need to make sure that you have somebody that's qualified, that knows what they're doing.
We're familiar.
Absolutely.
We've learned that lesson. Okay. Any other questions, members? Mr. Chairman?
Okay. So then, on January 23rd, at our next meeting, we had a couple of items. The first one was recurring contracting of outside services. And what we asked for, in terms of a presentation, to look at some of the services that may have been done inside in the past, and just understand what the rationale was for contracting them outside. And looking at my notes, I believe Mr. Robert Michael, Director of Physical Plant, was the one who was primarily responsible for doing the presentation, and specifically what we looked at was the landscape maintenance contract. And he went through a series of slides explaining the methodology in terms of making a decision whether to be in-house or to go outside. And my recollection of that meeting was that in general the committee was pretty satisfied with the process that was done. Would that be a fair statement, fellow members? And then the second item we looked at was, there was, under the contracting of outside services, there was an item which was, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to change the slide. I literally took this from one of the agenda items, review of the use and control procedures for the region's bank credit card, $7 million purchase order, spend authority. So we looked at that in that meeting. And what we were particularly concerned about were the controls that were in place, given that there were credit cards being used in multiple locations in the school district. Carter Morrison put together a really excellent presentation, not only discussing what the approach was, but actually using screenshots from different computer systems and so forth, walk through what the controls were in place, the number of sign-offs and so forth. And I can say that in particular, I walked away very impressed, and I asked if this current school board had seen that presentation, and my recollection was that that was not the case, but previous school board had seen it, and I'd recommended that maybe they come and, Carter or whoever would do that presentation. And in particular, Jeff had a lot of insights because they use somewhat similar system in county, so he was kind of our committee expert on this. So Jeff, would you like to make some comments on that?
Yeah, like the chairman, I was impressed with the, we were looking at the internal controls is really what we're focused on doing, and we came away satisfied that the internal controls that are in place would reasonably protect the school board from, misuse of a credit card. Now, you're never going to have an internal control that's going to prevent 100% anything like that, but we felt very comfortable with the internal controls that are in place for your credit cards. And I also brought up a recommendation, and I don't remember what Carter said, whether they're doing it or not, but we do, at the county, we do some electronic paying with a credit card, and we get a rebate back on that. So I suggested that if you weren't doing that, that you get that. And we typically get around $100,000 a year rebate back that goes right into the general fund by paying vendor bills via an electronic credit card. And then we just, it just comes right out. It's considered a credit card, but it comes right out of our bank account. So we get a rebate on it. So I recommended if they weren't doing that, and I don't remember what Carter said, but yeah, I think you were
Dr.
doing
Randall.
That is exactly what we do.
Good.
We do get a rebate, and it is over $100,000.
Yeah.
And we can put that presentation together for the board so
Good.
they can see. It's actually a purchasing mechanism, and we get a rebate for it.
good.
Right, I remember a presentation to that effect, that the use of the credit card was a significant benefit to the district, similar to what the county's realizing. I think maybe even been a bit more than that, so
Yeah.
it's good to know.
Any comments?
No.
Mrs. Simchuk?
And I'm
You have a
not
question,
sure,
or-
the only thing I would caution, and usually it's like a consortium or something that gives the rebate, but what I would caution is, as you add new vendors for your monthlies, things that would be considered, like if, let's say you picked up a new EGP lease or something like that, and they would accept it. That's what happens sometimes. There's a complacency that they figured out these vendors could be paid by credit card, but then as you add new vendors, you forget to add the new vendors, so that would just be somebody doing that. But I had asked that specifically, and I'm glad you asked as well, because that's a few cars or whatever that can be used to be purchased with that fund.
What's an EGP?
I'm sorry, it's like a HP printer, or
Oh,
it's a leased printers. I think that's the local company in town.
Got it.
It's a copier company that
Copier company.
Okay.
leases out copiers.
It's got a big chunk of the government business.
Thank you.
Any other
Other
questions
questions?
on that?
Mr. Chairman?
Okay, then our final meeting of this currently constituted audit committee was on May 21st. Now, I know I gave a presentation on May 22nd about it. I just want to clear up one misconception in terms of a comment that was made on May 22nd at the school board meeting, that this meeting was in some way rushed. That wasn't the case. What happened was that we had scheduled, not knowing what was going to be on the agenda for May 22nd, we had scheduled this meeting on May 21st. Brenda, in terms of trying to schedule meetings, I think sometimes she must have felt like she was herding cats between all of us, because 3 of the board members have full-time jobs, and so I was the easy one to schedule. We just happened to schedule the meeting on May 21st, and then the week before, I looked ahead at the school board agenda and saw that Mr. Searcy had an agenda item to potentially look at a legal services RFP. So after we went through this extended discussion, I asked the other members of the audit committee, after we had come up with these motions, which I'll discuss in a moment, could I have their permission to discuss the recommendations at the school board meeting the following evening, May 22nd, excuse me, at 6 p.m. Because obviously, if we did the work and you guys didn't have the benefit of it, then we were wasting our time. So that's what developed there. So we had it, and also there was some discussion on the May 22nd meeting what our mandate was, and the school board chairman and I had a discussion about that we were really going to look at it from the cost side. Dr. Rendell provided us a lot of information in terms of what the costs were for legal services, not only for the general counsel, but for all the specialized things such as real estate, for the current unitary lawsuit, as well as the other things. And we did have some discussion about that, but we really focused on the general counsel. And what I had provided to the members of the committee in advance of the meeting, 2 surveys I came across. One was from the Florida District Association of School Superintendents, where they did a survey of legal costs. That the approximate time that was done was in July 2015. And then Escambia County had also done one in March in 2015. And in looking through those surveys, it was clear that different school boards and different school districts may have answered the questions different ways. So it just gave us a general frame of what costs might be around the school districts around the state. And in looking at what our costs were, with the motion that the first motion that was passed was the committee requests that the school board put out a request for proposal, RFP, for general counsel services to assure taxpayers they are getting the best deal for these services, taking into account not only cost, but importantly, value of legal advice provided. And we did not feel that we could make that judgment based on what we know about Ms. DeGresta's services to the school board. That we didn't have any way to judge that. Obviously, we've never been in any shade meetings or anything else like that. So it was our view, look at the cost, but don't make a decision solely based on the cost, but also the value of legal service provided. And at the end of the day, only you folks, we believe, can make that judgment. Make some comments on that before we move on.
Yeah, we had detailed, you had provided us, Mr. Chair, a detailed packet to go through with invoices, and we did a big analysis on that. And again, this has nothing to do with the quality of service. We're just looking out for the taxpayer, saying every so often you need to make sure that you're getting, the value for what you're paying.
Mrs. Simchick.
And I want to thank you for reviewing this, and I did listen to the tape, and as tasked, you handled it correctly. What I was disappointed in was nothing that the committee did, but I listened to the questions that were asked to Mr. Morrison, and he wasn't forthright with some information. He wasn't able to tell you who was involved in the 2012 RFP. One member, I couldn't tell the voices when they asked, but somebody asked, could you tell us who responded to 2012 and what didn't come out in this whole process, which I thought was sad, but I feel that since we're televised, need to be mentioned again, that Ms. Diagresta responded in 2009 to an RFP. And out of the group, she was selected, I should just say, in position, our current attorney. And in 2012, in the RFP process, our current attorney did not respond. And that that the board chose nobody on that 2012. And this information was not reviewed, which might have helped a little, or may not have made a difference. But it was just something that was not transparent to you. And that, which we found out was kind of a little shocking, that at the time, the chairman was an attorney, and he ran down and decided to negotiate, and that our current attorney right now negotiated, or I should say, went into contract with us, but never raised. So the 2009 fees, and it's now 2018, are still the same. Not that, again, nothing like going out to a RFP and taking off the current attorney who's keeping their salary at, 2009, but again, in general, in policy, it is good to go out. As far as the board, though, when you work at will, like the school board, and nothing, again, I always bring this up and I feel that I'm, but it would be the same. Do you have confidence in your school board attorney, or do you have confidence in your school board superintendent? So having someone contracted is a little different, and that goes on to, and I'll let you go back to whether it's an in-house. In-house is different, I think, because it's an employee, but contracted services that, as it probably did in 2012 to the current attorney, said, if there's no confidence, I'm not going to do that. But I just wanted to say, because again, through all the various discussions, none of that was given to the committee, which it might have been very light bulb, 2009, wow. And then it's a very hard, as you said, very hard to make you're not comparing apples to apples, because you have different, it's like our claims. The county claims for health insurance are totally different than the school board. Nobody, that's why we don't marry in that collaborative. But I was, when I listened to the tape, very disappointed in that our staff did not give you like I said, it may not have made a difference, but it would have been at least valuable.
Yes.
And to all to have at least given the current attorney credit for not raising their prices, but it's a taxpayer. We are, challenged with the taxpayer dollars. So you do this parliamentary or procedurally instead of, like as if you'd known, you should have said, then you guys might have said, we know that, but we think this is good. Because as I said, I listened, and it was just difficult to hear that nobody from staff came prepared with, and again, I don't know who asked, it would have been good to know who was on that list in 2012.
Yeah.
To know that there was a lot, due diligence and everything. But as I said, that's just something, since I had the three of you out of 5, and it's, again, can be bonded through the airwaves, it's important to give our current attorney credit for having kept prices, since attorneys don't usually do that.
Well, from my perspective, I don't know, I'd be interested in your thoughts whether that would have been particularly relevant, because we were looking at current prices versus current prices. As close as we could get 2015. So I don't know, my view, whether the price was higher or lower from earlier, I don't think it would have made any difference. I think the conclusion we came to was there was a wide range of prices here, and it was worthwhile to test the market. So that's the thing we came to. Obviously, the school board can do with that recommendation what they wish. The second motion on the next page was that we recommended to the school board they put a policy in place to periodically put out an RFP for legal services and suggest a review of the current services at least every 3 years. 3 years, because should it be 4, should it be 5? It's sort of that was sort of a guess on our part, but I think we came to the conclusion it's a good practice to test the market every once in a while. And again, it has nothing to do with making a judgment of the value received or perceived of the legal service. Again, we felt that we could not make that judgment, but let's call a spade a spade. It is a very significant cost to the school district at $264,000 a year, plus mileage reimbursement, plus other expenses. You can hire a few teachers for that, and we're not here to make a judgment and say that number is definitely too high, or it should be higher, or anything else like that, but I think we felt that it was worth checking out.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
We seem to be focusing on general counsel. I wonder if it was ever contemplated to look at all categories of legal services, because that was kind of the direction in which I thought this was headed, but I wanted to make sure that we're understanding it, because it's not explicitly stated that all forms of legal services to be real estate, risk management, that type of thing.
Right, I think in part it came down to time, because there are a lot of line items, and at least it wasn't clear to me, and maybe the other members have a different viewpoint, how exactly those services were contracted for. It was just a kind of a brief discussion with Dr. Rendell, and I'm probably not being fair to him and the other members of the school administration about the specialization of those services. You have an HR firm, and part of the other thing was that we didn't have a set of numbers to even begin to look at. As I mentioned, we recognized there were the numbers that we got on these two surveys we had to take with a large grain of salt. We didn't know where to go and try to make assessments of the other. I mean, that's something that probably if this board or the newly constituted board after November election wants to keep the committee in place, maybe that's something that they want to take a look at. So we just didn't have enough time. As I recall, this meeting went 2 hours or something. And
And he's right. We just didn't have the time. But we recognize that the school board has to have attorneys that are specialized in certain areas, and that the general counsel can't be a jack of all trades. And we realize, we just didn't have the time to delve into how those specialty attorneys were contracted with. But I concur with the chairman's comments that if this committee is to continue in the next year, that would be the first thing that we would tackle, is to see how these specialty attorneys, are contracted with and what the process is.
Thank you. So then that information would be a driving factor in a decision to recommend as a practice every 3 years putting those types out to RFP? Or do you think that that's a sound enough universal practice to put in place that a newly constituted board should consider perhaps 1 year, year 1, year 2, year 3, real estate, risk management, that type of thing, so that, one, we're not doing, a million RFPs at once, we're not having a whole bunch of turnover at once, but just as a general practice, it seems as though the audit committee supported testing the market, to use your term. So in thinking about it on a go-forward basis.
Since we really didn't cover it, personally, I think in general, testing the waters is a good idea, but frankly, I didn't know enough about those contracts. We did get a sheet prior to the meeting with the cost per hour of those different items, but didn't really, I personally didn't understand the interaction between the administration and those particular specialized law firms. So I think I would need to know more there.
And I would like to footnote again that, we're making that recommendation based on trying to maximize the taxpayer's benefit.
Sure.
However, at the end of the day, you as a body have to feel comfortable with, sometimes you may have to pay a little bit more for quality service. This is all footnoted by the fact that at the top of the heap has to be the value of the service you're getting, and labor attorneys are, there are out there, but there are good labor attorneys and there are not so good labor attorneys. So you need to make sure that you're getting the best value, of legal advice, along with trying to maximize. And sometimes paying a little bit more for expertise will prevent you from having a bigger claim or, something to have to pay down the road. So you have to take that into account as well.
Thank you.
One thing I'll just say is that I did sit at the school board meeting where the board was given a presentation about a potential scoring system for the legal services RFP. I was a little disappointed the cost was not in there as any of the items, if my recollection is correct. It was all about the value of services provided. And I think that should play a part, but not should be the overriding thing. But that, again, that is only my personal opinion. The committee did not look at that.
Great. Well, hopefully the new board is paying attention. I'm sure the surviving two members are. Mr. Searcy and then Mrs. Simchik.
But by having a policy in place that every 3 or 4 or 5 years you review, go out for an RFP, it doesn't come down that we're out to get somebody.
No.
And to me, that's what, that has been conveyed out into the public by comments made by some folks on this board. We're out to get somebody. And by having that policy in place, where we go out for an RFP every 3 or 4, whatever years, you don't have that problem. It just makes it easier to get through the issue, and you get the job done at the same time. So.
Mrs. Simchik.
So I was going to tie this into the comment, and it was just a comment about not at cost, and Mr. Smith talked about value, and then my other board member said that it's a policy. Then it's either two ways. Either there's two people that work at will for the school board, and that you have to have the confidence or value in, which would be the attorney and the superintendent. So and I would say this to Mr. Searcy, then would that stand, bless you, would that stand, usually you with that type of confidence, like with the superintendent, we decided on hiring a superintendent, then we contracted or negotiated the price. We didn't say, which superintendent, which one, you're going to charge us this much, you're going to charge us this month. So I would ask Mr. Searcy, then would that be, you would want an RFP, which is a moot point because it's a personal opinion, we're both not here, but would you, in that vein of thinking, would you say then the superintendent should be RFP'd every 3 years?
I'm talking about legal services.
No, well, if you're talking about
legal
services, we have services for,
I'm talking about legal services.
why is legal services if they
Because
work
that's
at
what I wanted to
Phil?
say.
Okay, well, then I would disagree. If two people, if we can't hire anybody in the county to work for us, as far as we interview and we have control, and we only have control of 2 hiring positions, then it's at will of 5 people. And I think at will at 5 people, either you have a policy of RFP for both, or, or they work at will. And if one board member wants to bring up, as board members have, for whatever reason, it's because of, for whatever reasons, one board member can bring it up and 2 other agree and it changes. But if there's a policy, then it should be either across, I'm saying, that would be my thing if it works at will. I don't think the attorney is any different than the super, but this is me. Doesn't matter, I'm gone, he's gone. But I'm just saying, so if I'm saying my feeling, that it works at will, and that if it only takes 3 board members to go out to RFP for someone because the value outweighs the cost as far as trust and whatever. But you'd have to have all these other things in your knowledge bank of the prices weren't raised or whatever. But if, that's why just saying that if you're going to have an RFP process to get the best value for the taxpayer, then you would have it with all things, whether it's contracting not one attorney, as Mr. Frost said, but all attorneys, and then where do you stop? Do you stop that, or you go over to the superintendent. So it's just healthy discussion. I do want to throw, even though we're talking about legal services, if the committee continues, and you do go back and discuss this, which I would think it just would make sense to go out for all services if you're going to RFP. But skipping back to the medical, and I know you'll agree with Mr. Frost, although right now Aon does not think that it's beneficial to go to one medical policy, that's because the trending is good.
Right.
One, we have 3 different policy premiums, 3 different benefit packages for medical. And I think that if you're going to go out and see fully insured, self-insured, that, and if discussions continue, I would love to see that pulse taken periodically as well, because we have heard differently where it was quite expensive for the school district to carry 3 policies because we lose buying power by diluting it.
Mrs. Justice.
I'd just like to say, right now, as it stands, the recommendation has been that it is not, in fact, costing us an additional amount of money above and beyond what a single plan would. However, this is another issue where I think value comes into play, and our teachers have sit on high TEF in the union, and having the 3 plans is something that they consider to be a benefit and a value. And so in negotiating with our teachers and making sure that we're providing our employees with not only salary, but benefits and things that, that they find value in. I think that idea of, cost versus value needs to be weighed.
Well, and then I just want to comment that I'm very glad you agree with value.
Well, if I can just make a comment on it, yeah, value to legal service is important, but you don't want to pay infinite dollars for it. And so you have to make a judgment, because you're making a guess on the value of the services, whereas the dollar figure is precise. So, use an example of one person, if one law firm is willing to do this for $250 and another law firm is willing to do it for $500,000 or $600,000, that's a pretty high hurdle that you have to, as board members, I believe, for the taxpayers, have to get over in order to pick that higher priced person. You got to be pretty darn sure that they're really going to provide that extra value, because that's a lot of money.
Mrs. Justice.
I think that's an excellent point. I want to say, in this case, that is not the case. That is not the current case right now as it stands, those figures. Just to be clear, the other thing that you brought up, which was a really interesting point, is it's true. You have not been, you said shade meetings. We refer to them as executive session meetings. You have not sat in on executive session meetings, and I appreciate you acknowledging the fact that you haven't actually been in that position and working with the current board attorney. And so just, I wanted to say thank you for that. Thank you for that acknowledgement of recognizing when I say value, it may not be value as far as a cost dollar, although cost should be one of the primary concerns that we have. It should be at the forefront, but the idea of value, historical knowledge is also something that has to be weighed.
And I would add to that I was actually going to say the same exact thing. Value in those, quote, shade meetings is something that it's good that you've acknowledged it, because folks won't know for 3 years, really, until the value that's been delivered and some of the backstories and maybe even some of the he said, she said that's out here now, and even some of the timing of these suggestions for going to an RFP is interesting. So as you read those documents in 3 years, you'll be better aware as to some of the true value that's been delivered through this process, and why some of the board members may have opinions one way or the other. So I do appreciate that, and of course, I appreciate that you can't know that, and you can't have complete, perfect knowledge.
And
so.
all the members during the discussion
Acknowledge that.
that. Yeah, so it was that.
That's great. Thank you so much for that.
Okay, all right. We'll get to the last recommendation in the set. The Audit Committee recommends the school board request the administration do an analysis of the cost and benefits of having inside legal counsel versus the current system of contracting outside general counsel. Again, it's just looking at relative costs. There's different models that fit for different districts or for different government entities. The county has an in-house counsel who is very skillful, Dylan Reingold. The town of Indian River Shores, where I'm a councilman, we contract with a law firm, with a counselor, Chester Clem. So not one size doesn't fit all, but we suggested take a look at it from time to time, because again, you're spending a lot of money for legal services in general. Just not general counsel, but as it was mentioned earlier, real estate, HR. I mean, I'm not going to get into the lawsuit because I don't know anything about that, but you're spending a lot of money there, and it adds up. It's millions of dollars, so it's worth taking a look at. Okay, and they were the items, and as I mentioned earlier, again, thank you to Dr. Rendell for providing the right people to come and give presentations, answering questions. Carter did a really good job on presentations and his knowledge set, and Brenda for just getting those meetings set. I'm sure she was getting frustrated, but she does a great set of minutes. I'm going to tell you, I go to a lot of government meetings because I sit on, as Indian River Shores, a county representative, like on Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council and things of that nature. Her minutes are the equal of anybody, so I want to say thank you to her as well.
Thank you. Mrs. Justice.
I just wanted to say thank you to our committee members. Charlie is not here, and Mr. Herron, but thank you to the committee members that are here today. I know that you all have busy schedules, and I appreciate the time and the dedication that you've shown over the past year. And, you know, as Mr. Albert, you just said, you sit on many different things, and you truly add so much value to our community. So thank you for your time and your dedication.
Second.
And thank you, Brenda.
Sorry, we're not allowed to vote. Mr. Searcy.
I have one question. Whenever you folks have your meetings and you make recommendations, or you all get together and vote and everything, how do you convey that to this board? How often do you convey that? Is this the only time this information has been conveyed to us in a
No,
recommendation?
I know that issue came up, Mr. Searcy, so I went back and spent a lot of time preparing for this, going back and looking at videos. Really, if you go back, legal services, we know when that was done. So the cost and delivery method of an employee benefits, I'm not sure of the second bullet point there, but the first bullet point, there was a discussion at the school board meeting on December 12th, 2017. If you want to look at it on the video, it's at a 47-minute and 30-second mark. So we did, but the second one may not have gotten to you. I don't remember. Maybe Dr. Rendell recalls bringing it up or not. I can't remember. So.
The reason for the question is the timing of what you folks have to say to this body. And it just looks like if you folks come together with a unanimous verdict, or whatever you want to call it, that your ideas need to be conveyed to us. I think time is of the essence, because you don't know what we're going to be talking about next month or the month after that. So as a suggestion, if you folks are brave enough and get appointed for the next board folks who come up, I would just like to see that happen instead of waiting till the end of the year or assuming that the superintendent's going to bring it to us, or Carter, or anybody's going to bring it to us. Time is everything, and it would be a benefit, I think, to this board and the district if we had your thoughts all along instead of waiting till the end of the year. And I don't think that's what you
That's a
did,
fair
but,
point.
yeah.
Mrs. Justice.
I would imagine that would be at the direction of the board rather than the direction of the committee, setting up that type of a structure. That perhaps it would be a quarterly workshop item that the audit committee would come on a quarterly basis, and it would just be an update as to, or monthly, sir, or they can come every workshop every month and make a, but that would be at the direction of the board, would it not, sir? Shaking
Talking
your
to me?
head. Yes.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I'm just making a suggestion that if they make recommendations, they're charged with responsibility, or I guess the responsibility of looking at items and bringing information back to us, to the board, for our consideration.
At the direction of the board.
Yeah, we're saying, hey, you guys, this is what we want you to look
Yeah.
at, bring us back some
Well,
ideas or thoughts or whatever, you know.
Want to speak first?
Well, one of the things I would say is, since our meetings are documented and available to the public, they're definitely important to you as a board, that I'm surprised to learn that it's not something that y'all reviewed since y'all appointed us, you know.
I'm
and-
sorry, reviewed as an
yeah,
individual
As
board
an
member?
individual?
Item.
I certainly
As
did.
individuals, we have.
As individuals,
At
I
least-
reviewed the minutes and listened to all of the audio.
Okay, so
Right
if you
after every
have,
single
then
meeting.
you know then
Yeah.
recommendations made.
Yes.
At that point.
But I guess
But
that
if you-
requires an extra step by board members that some
Yes.
perhaps are not ready to take. Mrs. Simchek.
Thank you, and Ms. Gilmore, that's great that we all listen, but she could say, I don't like that, and I like that, and we like that. We have to have work as a
So you're
collegiate.
saying you would want interaction between,
Well-
after we've made our recommendation, you'd want immediate interaction
Someone,
between us? Is
so
what
that it
you're
would be
saying?
timely. So to finish my thought, and again, this would be for moving forward, I'm just putting it out there since it's behind me and it's my thought, and hopefully future board members will hear, and it would be, obviously, sometimes the chairman may stay the same or whatever, but the chairman, I mean, I see you met, whatever it was, that was the 6th time. If your board or committee takes action and configures a thought or motion or pass, then I don't know if the appropriate time, and again, it's up to board discretion, but where we have presentations, obviously, if you're eating it a bite at a time, it's not going to take up a lot of time, and I don't think, nothing against our workshops, but it's really us and you, or us and the other people presenting, and I think that's something that the public should hear. It would be more valuable at a 6 PM meeting, committee, after presentation, committee reports, none, because we may not have none, but at some time after you meet, or the committee meets, if it's a committee or a different committee, that if there's something to report on that's juggled into that slot, and hopefully somebody from the committee, your committee, or another committee, if they had a report, could report to, because as Mrs. Zork says, it could be timely. We could have had a different outcome on fee-based versus commission-based on the Aon recently, or something like that. So, we could have, it might have been fresh. Again, we might have, I'm not knowing the time, it might have straddled different boards, I can't remember. But I think that maybe something like that, the new board school board might want to consider in conjunction with the audit committee, having that fresh report. Like if you just had a discussion and you were waiting further information, there's nothing to report. But if you had a unanimous vote on something, then that's a 5-minute thing at a public meeting where more people are watching and getting that information. I think it's important if you're doing works as the neutral of the constituents, that they get to hear it too, because most people are not going to video stream today's meeting. So it would be helpful, and I appreciate everyone for doing that. I kind of would have, even though this is a workshop, I would have liked this at a board meeting for other people. You did such hard work and a lot of work. It would have been great for everyone to hear all the hard work that you did.
Can I, since we're talking about this, I wasn't going to bring it up, but since it was brought up, make a suggestion to have the audit committee, well, let me read the bylaws and policies for the audit committee, 6840 audit committee. The school board may create an audit committee that reports to the board through the superintendent and shall direct and monitor the internal audit function. The committee shall be governed by rules and procedures set forth below. I'm going to make a suggestion, but I want to make it very clear before I do. I complimented Dr. Rendell multiple times in terms of the cooperation he gave us and everything else. I will tell you that in the private sector, the best practice for an audit committee, it does not report through the chief operating officer or effectively the chief executive officer. It reports directly to the board of directors. So again, I don't want anybody to say I'm knocking him, because I'm not. But I would suggest you change that reports to the board through the chairman, and then have a direct dialogue. Again, he did not inhibit us in any manner or anything else, but I think that's just good corporate practice, and I'd be interested in the comments of my fellow
Well, I would
members.
concur. My internal audit staff reports directly to me. And then I would transmit anything that relates to the county directly to them. So it's not something, I would concur that we need to be reporting directly to the chairman of the school board. And then that would solve the problem that Mr. Searcy has brought up about, timely reporting, because if that's the case, then I'm sure the chairman, whoever that may be, would put it on an agenda for the next board meeting. So I would concur with Mr. Allwater's advice or recommendation that you change that in the policy manual.
That sounds like a great suggestion. Thank you for that. And you're right, that's how it works in the private sector. And in fact, even our audits come to our private residents so that we make sure that there's no ability for it to be diverted in the district mail or anything like that. So that's great feedback. Thank you so much for that. And hopefully, future boards will recognize that. Mrs. Ork, you had your hand up.
Yeah, you touched on this, but I do think that with the new board coming on, that this is something, your recommendations, we should discuss this at that time on if we want to move forward with the audit committee, A, and B, take in consideration the recommendations you have made, because we do know that we probably need to put in the policy timely reporting to the board. What does that look like? It's going to depend on what the board wants. And then, I agree with your recommendations, so I appreciate them.
Mrs. Simchak.
Might I add again, I also am not sure, I'm a little fuzzy, and it might help too. I really think that publicly, if there is action to adopt that recommendation, shouldn't that be on a general?
Yes,
So,
from a parliamentary standpoint.
although this was presented as things do, elections and things come, and then those recommendations went like this, and it was never voted on, nothing that that's why I want to ensure your good work gets action. So, I don't know who puts it on, but I think that the recommendations need to be on.
To accept the recommendations.
To accept the recommendations. So that's just so that your hard work is cemented and sealed. So perhaps a review of the audit committee, how they answer to and whatever was great, and then how they report and action items on the agenda, just to ensure. And again, obviously, this was resurrected committee from years ago maybe, so we're green, we apologize, but I think that would be something that the future board should do that, because your hard work should be valued and voted on and accepted and cemented in the minutes of our meetings and televised.
Well, and
Mrs.
that brings up
Justice.
a really good point, because, committees in general, you said resurrected, in general, this committee will sunset now. And, committees do not come in and then go on,
Right.
So, if this new board wants to resurrect the audit committee again, or wants to ask the audit committee to come in and give direction as to what they would like this new committee to review, and that will be the decision of the new board. And then, of course, you'll have to go, Mr. Allwater is Mr. Frost's appointee. If that will no longer be, so someone would ask Mr. Allwater to then be a part of that committee. So it'll be a new committee.
So then,
I would also recommend that you come to the audit committee meetings and listen and hear all the stuff. Realizing, of course, that if there are two or more of you, you have to remain silent. You cannot ask a question. But if there's just one of you, you can ask all the questions you want.
Well, I think that would not be the most collegial approach, though. We've run into similar situations in the past. Mrs. Simchak.
which is why we went to, now we have an audio.
Right.
So we listened, and I thank you for that. So we are, I mean, I can't judge or be responsible for other people, but yes, I listened. So that mechanism we did, we agreed with you, we should be listening. But with that being said, and since this board appointed these people, I think that these items should be put on, but they should be separately, or I mean, I don't know exactly how, but these should be between now and this school board sunsetting an action item, because these are recommendations, and I think that,
Well, typically you would accept a report. right? Just like a financial report from a parliamentary standpoint, one accepts reports, one doesn't enforce them.
Correct.
You simply accept the recommendations of the. Yeah, exactly.
And
So
since that
we
can't
can
be
work
done
through that.
here, because this is an action
Correct.
thing, we should put it on an agenda. she
I'll work
says.
with Mrs. DiAugusta and
Thank you.
Dr. Rendell to make sure that happens. If it's not right, then you can talk about it at that meeting and we'll fix it. Hopefully, we've only got like 2 or 3 left. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. All right.
Mr. Chair, I believe you have some presentations for the voluntary members of
do.
the audit committee.
We do. In addition to doubling your pay if you come back,
He's kidding, that's a joke.
Yeah, I remember.
What's
first
2 times
grade,
0?
Yeah, something times 0 is,
Right.
yeah, still 0.
math facts. We have these certificates suitable for framing, should you choose to.
So you
And
choose to spend your money to frame it.
hey, you're the fiscal conservatives. We appreciate that. We have these envelopes. I mean, that's something, right? No, just in appreciation for all your hard work and the hours of sacrifice and scrutiny by the media and all sorts of other wonderful things that come with public service. We just wanted to thank you. We thought to do this in the evening meeting, but it was difficult enough getting 3 folks together for the workshop. So we wanted to make sure that you received them. So at this time, Dr. Rendell or Kristen, did you have a vision? Just okay, move somewhere and take a picture and hand them
We
out?
want to close the workshop.
Okay, we'll close the workshop and do that afterwards. All right. Anything else? No, nothing, no business before us. We are adjourned.